Hello out there, Internet! It's me, James Ferguson, with episode 96 of Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorDNA.com. This week's guest is Mark London, the CEO and CCO of Mad Cave Studios, as well as the writer of Wolvenheart, an upcoming Victorian time travel thriller. This was an awesome chat because Mark has a multi-layered perspective of the comic book industry. On one side, he's a creator, and on the other side, he's running a business. I also picked his brain about the Mad Cave talent search, where he's looking for new and upcoming writers and artists to work on some of the Mad Cave titles. Wolvenheart is set to debut on October 30th. I've gotten a look at the first issue, and it's pretty cool. It's full of monsters, time travel, and a bit of steampunk. It's definitely worth checking out. Mark can be found on Twitter as @MarkLondonMCS, and you can learn more about Mad Cave Studios at the official website, madcavestudios.com. In other news, I promise I'll be back soon with another episode. It's already recorded. Sorry for the delay, folks. For now, please enjoy episode 96 of Funny Book Splatter with my guest, Mark London. So, Mark, to start us off, if you were to pitch Wolvenheart to someone, how would you describe the book to somebody?
This story follows the most prolific time-traveling monster slaying in Wolvenheart, which his name is Sterling Cross. And Wolvenheart is an organization dedicated to monitoring paranormal anomalies in the space-time continuum, and it's led by the legendary Professor Van Helsing. So after a group infiltrates and decimates by a cabal of history's most infamous villains, which are led by the most notorious serial killer of all time of the 16th century, named Elizabeth Bathory, Sterling winds up trapped in an alternative reality where his only choice is to fight his way through time and change the course of history. So this story is for fans of Doctor Who, Castlevania, Penny Dreadful, The League of Extraordinarily Gentlemen by Alan Moore. It's a time-traveling Victorian monster slayer comic book.
I mean, I think you got me right there at the end there, too. Like, time-traveling Victorian monster slaying, like, you know, those are like a bunch of words that I don't necessarily know would ever go together, but you line them up like that, like, I'm in, okay.
Yeah, that was the idea behind this comic. I mean, let's try to make it different. Let's try to make it wild. Let's try to bring some concept that we haven't seen probably in this genre before. So, hey, and Wolvenheart came to life, so...
Mm-hmm. And now this is it's an organization too. It's not like that was the first thing I looked at. I was like, oh, okay, the guy on the cover is named Wolvenheart. But then obviously when you're thinking to it, oh no, that's the organization. And from the look, I got a sneak peek at the first issue there, and it is very much a vast organization that seems to run deep. It's you know, comparing it to something like the Watchers Council and Buffy the Vampire Slayer is probably doing it a disservice just because of like how big and vast it's more like a supernatural version of like the MI6 that James Bond works for. You know, it seems very large and not cumbersome, but just like vast, huge in scope.
Correct. And also because they're able to time travel, so they can go to the future, they can go to the past. They have been present in certain big moments in history. So we're not going to touch upon a lot of how Wolvenheart works. I kind of want to leave that lingering for the reader to actually be like, okay, what is this going on? How exactly did this came out to be? So I'm focusing a little bit more in is what do they stand for? What are they supposed to do? What is their mission and what is their purpose for the story? And it's to try to keep the timeline in check because there are these monsters, the specters, which were released in a point in time in history, and they need to try to intercept that point in time when the specters are going to come to life, and they're just going to go and fuck everything up. So So yeah, it's a fun concept. It's a fun concept, and but yes, as you were saying, James, it runs deep.
Yeah, and in looking the way that you tackle time travel in here is a little different than what I've seen before, in that like you visually show it at one point. There's this gorgeous double page spread in the book that like shows how Sterling travels through time, and it's like, oh, like I never really think of that to some extent, but it's like no, this. It has to be time and space because, you know, the Earth moves around the sun, so we get to see that in some shape or fashion. Like, oh my God, like they did their homework. It's not just, oh, you know, we pop through time and we're all set. Like, no, like, you can't do that because then you'll end up in the middle of space. So even though it's supernatural focus, you have like that like small science side of it that like is backing everything up.
Yeah, I mean, you need to include it in your story to make it a little bit more believable, and not just like, okay, he opens up a portal and then he just pops up out the other way, and you'd be like, okay, fine. But I remember that when I had it in the script, and I was talking with Alejandro Giraldo, which is the artist for this series, which is fantastic. He told me, how exactly do you want me to approach this page? What is exactly that we were doing here? So we had a blast, just like talking about like, hey, why don't we have him jumping around the earth at different points but blend space and time and try to see. And he was like, okay, and I guess that's the double page spread that you have in front of you.
Yeah, and I think like there is a lot of potential for this series in terms of the types of monsters. I mean, look, there's a never-ending list of monsters that are out there, and you see a handful of them in this book. In the first issue alone, mm-hmm. I mean, do you have like are you looking at like a wish list and be like, man, I really want to be able to do this, or are you working with your artist now to say like, well, what kind of monsters do you want to draw, and how can you incorporate them into the story?
Well, I'm just going to tell you this. When we sat with Alejandro the first time, because he's also a Castlevania buff, and I've been a lover of all monsters from the 50s and 60s, and I was like, listen, I want a story that I want to play with Dracula, I want to play with the werewolf, I want to play with Frankenstein, I want to play with these elements, but let's not do it as you've seen it done a million times. Why don't we just blend it and do it the Mad Cave way? So Alejandro was like, okay, I'm going to take then what you like from this type of folklore, from the original monsters, and I'm going to blend it with my style because I do love Castlevania. So and I guess that's how the style for Wolvenheart came to be.
Right, and that's where the Victorian angle comes in, I guess, in that extent too. So it's funny how all these pieces just kind of like come together. It's like you had this big vast board, and you're like, I want to play with these toys. How can I mash them all together?
Exactly. And just to try to make it fun. I mean, sometimes some of the gore elements, I mean, are there. Some of the creepy elements are going to start creeping up as the issues progress. But I really wanted to also have a fun story at its core. Have a slayer, have a lot of action, have a lot of fighting between this type of monsters, which they're so cool, and then you can explore in so many different ways. So that's really what I was going for.
Now, you mentioned something in there that I wanted to pick apart a little bit. You said the Mad Cave way. So you have now you're not just the writer of Wolvenheart, but you're also the CEO and CCO of Mad Cave Studios. So
yes.
What is the Mad Cave way? How do you define that?
Well, we love to tell stories. I mean, we started the company 4 years ago, and it was a passion of me for the longest time. And with my wife, one day we just said, like, listen, why don't we try to get a publisher up and running, and let's try to put some fun stories out there. So really, what we wanted to do is create comics that they show you creativity all around. And with that said, I mean, the Mad Cave way is just books that will provide high quality entertainment that you can have a lot of fun having with our books, with our products, with different genres. So you can have the medieval fantasy story, you can have the cyberpunk story, you can have your feudal Japan story, you can have your Victorian set story. And so the Mad Cave way is basically that. It's mad stories, mad twist, mad fun.
Well said. Yeah, I think you guys are playing in like a very interesting space. I think, you know, it's similar in terms of more of a focus on genres. Like, look, the superhero space is pretty filled and cluttered by the big two publishers out there, but there's this like wide open field now for genre entertainment, whether that's sci-fi, fantasy, and horror, but you could play around with that. So I think I've seen things like Vault Comics, for example, is playing in that space now, and then I kind of see Mad Cave almost as like a, you know, what Top Cow was, you know, when that kind of started up, where, yeah, we're going to focus on these things, and this is an area of the industry that isn't really being serviced right now, and I think that's it's also just interesting that you start this with your wife, when like my wife and I can't agree on like, you know, when to watch a TV show, but you're like, let's launch an entire publisher. So Um,
Oh, believe me. I mean, sometimes we're in fight over the control, and sure, what are we also gonna watch in it, every night? But believe me, no. I mean, she just understood that I had a passion for this, and she basically just went with it. She's been my biggest fan, and I love her dearly for it, because it was really an uphill battle. I mean, I had no idea what it was going to turn out, and to be honest, James, I mean, at first it was just like eating glass. I mean, you were just like making so many mistakes left and right. And sure, one thing is when you are passionate about something and this is your hobby, but then when you really want to make it professionally, I mean, it completely shifts, and it's something that you have to work day in, day out, be better, check out the competition. We admire what Vault Comics is doing. I think that they're great. But that's exactly what we want to do. We want to try to tackle that space in the comic book industry, which is like, okay, superheroes, okay, they're already cornered by the big two. So let's try to make our own stories, mad comics, mad variety, mad fun, but with a lot of action, of adventure, of that good feeling, that good vibe from movies from the late 80s. So, I mean, I think that we're bringing all that stuff back, and again, just trying to make it our own, and hopefully people are going to have a blast while reading our books.
Yeah, well, look, if Wolvenheart and some of the other titles that I've seen so far are any indication, like you're on the right track with some of this stuff, so that's good. And I think is looking at this now. You said you made some mistakes along the way. It was like eating glass. That's a pretty terrifying phase. But you've been at this for five or so years now. I guess what would you have done differently? Yes. If anything, if you can kind of go back in time and kind of tell yourself back in 5 years ago, hey, don't do this, or make sure you do this thing instead. Is there a piece of advice you'd give to the fledgling Mad Cave Studios?
Yeah, I think that just try to get the right people on the team. Try to get people that see the world like you do, that they're going to be super professional about it, that they want the same things that you do, because there's, and I've heard a lot of your interviews, James, to other creators, and everybody sometimes complains that when they don't have the right partner, creatively, it's just going to be a nightmare. I mean, you're married, I'm married, and you know how that could be a completely horrible thing to have if you don't have you don't have the right partner by your side. So imagine if you creatively, which basically a lot of creators, they just put their skin out there. We put our heart and soul into each of our projects, and you don't have the right person backing you up. Trying to also make your child flourish and actually go into the world how you actually envision it. I mean, it could be terrible. So I would say that probably try to get the right people on board. Try to get a good vibe, good relationship, that you guys have good chemistry. And so far I've been lucky. I've been lucky with the team that we've assembled at Mad Cave Studios. Because everybody's super professional. Everybody knows exactly what they need to do, what the dream is, what we do want for this company to become in a 5-year plan. So I would just say that. I mean, sure, trust your gut, but have the right team with you all the time.
You said it best. It is like a relationship in that case where you have to both be in it just as much. So it can't be someone that's just kind of half-assing it. You have to be able to understand, like, this is the vision, this is what we want to accomplish, and if you don't have that, then it becomes a major problem. So I'm glad to hear that you found that those people, the right relationships, the right connections for that kind of stuff.
After a lot of trial and error, but we pulled through. But no, just kidding. But yeah, we eventually had we got the right people.
Aside from the obvious things in terms of like where the glut of the superhero market, are there, like, what about these genres have interested you and wanted to really play in those sandboxes? And particularly with something like Wolvenheart that plays so primarily in the horror genre.
Mm-hmm. We have to say probably medieval fantasy too, which we have Battle Cats. So is this great fantasy story with anthropomorphic cats. That they're kind of like your Knights of the Round Table, fighting evil left and right in this vast, also beautiful world called Valderia. So I think that fantasy has always been up there. Also, historical pieces, if you check a title by Mad Cave Studios also called Honor and Curse, which also kind of has some of supernatural elements, and I kind of tried to tap it a little bit with certain horror elements here and there, but I didn't want to steer too far away from the action and from the whole historical richness that feudal Japan can bring into the story. I also love that, and we have Knights of the Golden Sun, which is also your biblical epic. Not for religious people, but I mean, it touches the story of the archangels when their commander-in-chief, God, has decided to take a sabbatical for 400 years. So they're like, okay, what is it that we're supposed to do now? And then obviously Lucifer and the Fallen, they say like, okay, Big Papa's not looking anymore, so then we're gonna make a party out of this, and you see all this kind of relationships, and where do your loyalties lie, and this and that, but it's I don't know. I mean, is that I love so many. I just love storytelling altogether, James, and I like to tackle all these different themes and genres that I grew up with in the late '80s. I mean, all the way from watching your typical movies to your popular movies to video games to then later on Japanese animation, and I was completely blown away. And of course, when comic books, they just landed on my lap, and I started to read books by Neil Gaiman, by Alan Moore, by Grant Morrison. I mean, man, I was completely hooked, and I decided to do this for a living full time, and just tackle everything that I feel comfortable with.
Yeah, it's funny because I was just gonna ask if you were an '80s kid, because it's just like a lot of those things that were running through my. I was like, man, like I feel like he has the same kind of interest that I have with all these things, and I'm like, it lines up, but like that also lines up to what where the market is now, because you have all these people that grew up on things like. Battle Cats to me sounds like a Knights of the Round Table version of like Thundercats, and it's like you have sci-fi is cool, but like have you tried them with like more Arthurian legends kind of thing? And that's the kind of stuff where like I could see growing up and seeing these like this is cool, but I'd rather do something like this, and that just fuels that fire. So like there's so many of those elements now, and you look at like the box office, you look at a lot of the comics that are coming out now, like. There's a lot of licensed properties for stuff that came out in the 80s, and now it's having this new resurgence because we all grew up, and now there's a bunch of people in positions of power at these publishers and studios who are like, but I want to do that. I love this. More people should love this. But now you're making your own mark with it instead of just chasing like the Voltron license or something like that. You can make your own mark and make your own books that show. You could draw the line from the synergy from the homage of it, of like, this inspired me to make this, and you could see it's not like just telling a new story in that same world, but you're expanding and doing something else, but you could see that kind of seed of inspiration that came from sitting in front of the TV as a kid and being enamored after school or something.
Exactly, James, and that's really the vibe that I want to bring to the readers when they pick up a book from Mad Cave, that you can remember that your childhood and be like, okay, but this I remember something like this, and oh my God, this was my Saturday morning cartoon, and it was like so cool. Sure, there are a lot of things that from the 80s. The other day, it's funny, I was talking with Chris Fernandez, which is the CSO and also an editor at Mad Cave, and he was telling me, look, listen, the thing is that those things are super cool, but the problem is that they haven't aged well. So I was like, okay, you're absolutely right, but you know what? We're actually going to make this work for the 21st century. I mean, let's just do it. And again, that comes back to your question, like, okay, what is the Mad Cave way? I guess that let's just bring all things that made us feel all warm and fuzzy inside, and we had such a blast growing up that, and let's do it the Mad Cave way and bring it current, bring those things up right now. I mean, that's what we're doing.
It's like you're bottling nostalgia, then but finding using that just as like the engine to try to drive the overall machine. So it's really cool stuff. Now,
Correct.
Matt
Yes.
Cave is also expanding as well in that you're doing a talent search. So that I'm very intrigued by this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I have a lot of listeners are creators themselves as well. So can you speak a little bit about that and how this kind of came about?
Yes. Well, last year, during the summer, same time around, last year, I was the only writer for Mad Cave Studios. So I was going insane.
that's a lot. That's a lot to have on one plate. I got to create every world.
Yeah.
Okay, like.
No, and the problem is that you obsessed about all these worlds, and you're like, yes, they're my precious, and you don't want to let them go. But I mean, it's my wife drew the line and be like, okay, do we get more people on board, or you're gonna sleep on the sofa, or
yeah, it's
I
one
need
of
a
those
husband,
things like, yeah,
and alive and well.
You know, some people might collect
children.
action figures or comic books, and you're collecting entire stories that you're building and whole lines with stuff.
Yeah.
Like, no, we have enough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like what are you doing now? No, I'm just creating this little world.
Don't worry about
here.
it, honey. I got another one. Don't worry. I'll find room for it.
Exactly. Like no, don't worry about it. I'll make it. But no, it just came a time that which was just impossible to handle, and really I was really burnt out. So I was speaking with the team, and we were like, listen, we know that breaking into comics is hard. We have a lot of colleagues that they do their Kickstarter and they're pitching around their stories to other publishers, but we wanted actually to get unknown writers for them to have a shot at actually being known. We've been doing this for 4 years regularly, so we have this little marketing machine going on with social media and through the website. So this talent search is like, okay, come work for Mad Cave, work for hire. Let's work on this story. So with the winners, we sit down, we tell them exactly like, okay, we wanna tackle, let's say, Wolvenheart. So okay, so we have this cool time traveling monster hunter, Victorian, era story. Why don't we play around with this? Why don't we play around with that? And it's so funny to see those first meetings, because you can see their eyes, how they glow, how they start like glowing, and then how their wheels start turning, and then they start working with us, and they come out with their pitches, they come out with their outlines, and then they develop the story. We match them with either one of the talent search winners that is also going to be an artist, and we match them right then, and then we get them published, and they get their name around, and then they have something to show for the resumes, and they can probably tackle it to actually work in other bigger publishers or bigger stories or whatever. So the talent search came about like, okay, first let's try to give the opportunity to certain people that they're not going to be able to either do this by themselves, or that people are not going to give them the time of day, unfortunately, because they're swamped. Because there are a lot of people out there that they just care about what you just said, James. They just care about the licensed property, or they just get the known talent that has been around for 25 years. So, okay, so he's got his fan base, or it's because he's writing a popular character. So out of those three, we have none. So, but it's been our mission to actually just break ground and be like, listen, we're going to put the foundations of something that we just want to make ourselves. And I love that comparison with Top Cow, because I really admire that company. I really love what Max Silvestri was doing at the time with Michael Turner, with Witchblade, and it was great. And really that was why we decided to start a talent search, to give other people the opportunity to get their names on books out there that were going to be published and owned by Mad Cave Studios.
I see a definite overlap with like what Top Cow had done back in the day as well, because they had a similar setup. You know, they had all these, you know, products and characters and stuff like Witchblade and now things like Postal and Artifacts and stuff like that. And they're like, well, we can't, not everything can be handled by, you know, Mark Silvestri and Matt Hawkins. They need to be able to expand that out there. So they did the talent search, and then we got like some really great creators that came through there too. So now this is I mean, look, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but it's also like, this is a great model that like you have all these great properties and you're only one man, so like, you know, it's you're able to still maintain a voice and approval of the overall product, as I imagine, and then now you're able to just give these other people, kind of paying it forward here, to give others the chance to play in this sandbox.
Absolutely, James. And really, I mean, everybody at Mad Cave, I mean, I do get sometimes a lot of credit because they tell me like, okay, you're working on these IPs and you're putting your ideas forward. But really, it's the wonderful team at Mad Cave. I mean, I have a wonderful editor in chief. I mean, again, the CSO Chris Fernandez, even Brian Hawkins, which is another editor. And Mad Cave and all the artists and all the people in publishing and social media and the retailer relations manager. I mean, they all pitch in. I mean, everybody at Mad Cave pitches in, and then I listen to what everybody needs or has to say, because they're at the heart, they are lovers of this industry, and they really, really, really want to play in this sandbox, like you say, and we just want to bring people into the fold that actually see the world like we are, like we see it, I guess.
Yeah, I think so, like, comics are definitely a labor of love. No one's coming into this industry to to get rich quick or anything like that. So it's a little different there. But so that, like, so with that vibe, like, there, like, how do you go about I guess receiving entries for something like that? Because there's no set style when it comes to a comic script. So is there like a Mad Cave template or something like that people can submit across, or is it more like capturing a vibe of a certain book?
It's a little bit of both, but it's basically just capturing the vibe of a certain book that we have out there, playing along what we have right now. Because sometimes I've seen in the past how publishers, they get in trouble when they accept unsolicited material, because that they might be working on something similar to what you're sending, and then some people might perceive that you're taking advantage of them, blah blah blah. So we I really don't want, I respect every creator's work and everything, so that's why the guidelines are very, very strict here. So there's no room for to make any mistakes. So people would just pitch either something regarding Battle Cats or something regarding Midnight Task Force, which is some of our properties, and then we see if you have really what we're looking for. But at the end of the day, we're not looking for a format. We're just looking for somebody that can tell a story. If it's the artist, that you can properly handle sequential art, that you can nail down your expressions, that you can nail down your perspective, that you can open up the world, that you can let me get invested in a story without a single balloon. That's really the best comic out there. I tell the artist, listen, if I understand the story without a single word, I mean, you, my friend, did an excellent job, because that's really what comic books is. That's really what sequential art is. So that's really what we want to see from an artist. And from a writer, we want somebody that can really pour their souls, that they can really can grab you just from the get-go, and because we know that we are going to be able to work with them, and their story is just going to translate beautiful on paper. And then if we get a solid artist, I mean, that's really what we're looking for, because we know that the end consumer, which is the reader, the people that buy our comics, are going to be really, really happy with the Mad Cave product. And that's really what we try to oversee.
Right. So it's not necessarily having to submit like a whole script per se, more like an outline kind of setup.
No. Even there's a beautiful story from last year's talent search. Anthony Cleveland, which actually he's the writer for Show's End. His submission, I mean, was setting the Midnight Task Force world, James, but it was so moving and so sad that we were just looking at ourselves and be like, oh my God, I just want to cut my veins right here. But I mean, it was so good. It was not that it was just depressing, that you were just like, no, I mean, it was so well executed that it was like, I mean, and as soon as I read the story, it was like, okay. And at the end, we just had Aidan McCormick, which is the main character of Midnight Task, which is go to a rooftop, grab the guy, and throw him over the edge. But that didn't happen in Anthony's submission. But I mean, his story was so moving, and he really connected with everybody that was reading the story. That was like, man, you need to come and work for Mad Cave Studios.
Yeah, well, I mean, that so comes really, out, I think, in Show's End. I think you can see that kind of sad quality, but also like there's something more to it. So that might be a piece of the story that might pull you in a little bit, but then it only fuels the fire of like, I want to see someone get theirs after that. So yeah, they might go through tragedy and then go from something more.
Exactly. And that's really what you're looking for when you're trying to get an artist on your team or when you're trying to get a writer on your team. Is like, okay, what emotions, what strings are you going to pull from within? So it's like, I think that we nailed it with the guys that we selected from last year's talent search, and we're going to see if lightning strikes twice this year with 2019's talent search.
That's great. And that's something that's already showing that your talent search is paying off, and that you already are publishing another book with these folks. It's not just that they're continuing that. So was Show's End a book that came about because is that was that all Anthony, or was this something that was part of the Mad Cave kind of lineup that came about?
Mm-hmm. Well, we sat down with Anthony and we told him, listen, why don't we play with a story about a carnival? Of course, you sit down with them, and then when you start interviewing them, you start picking up their strengths, their weaknesses. You see where the strengths lie. So you try to actually give them a project where they're going to feel comfortable. It's not like somebody comes in and they just tell you like, okay, listen, my forte is not space operas. Oh, you know what? You're writing space operas. No, I mean, we want to kind of like work with their strengths and what they feel comfortable with. So one of the ideas that we had is that we wanted something, that resembled a carnival, that resembled the circus, the mischiefs, the those that are not well accepted by others, those that struggle, those, and I guess that we just gave those little one-liners to Anthony, and he came up with this beautiful world called Show's End. So it was with Anthony so easy. I mean, with everybody's different, James, because with Anthony it was just very, very easy moving the story along, and he nailed exactly what we were looking for. With others, sometimes we have to sit down and be like, okay, let's flesh out a little bit more the story, and even, hey, listen, these are the characters, and what do you play with these characters, and let's try to do this and that. But everybody's different. But in this case, yes, Anthony came with I would say with almost everything.
That's all. It sounds like such like a huge like a creative commune almost, where it's like, everyone kind of gets together. We're all in this. We all have this in this together. We all have the same goals in mind, and that we want to pitch a story and we want to go out there. So it's really beautiful, man. That you're able to make this thing, and it's like yeah. And then you look at some of the stories where it's like, oh well, this is some terrifying shit, but like you guys came to that together. That's what matters. It's really great.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, and that's what that's really what we're trying to do. I mean, we're trying to make beautiful comics. The idea behind Mad Cave is that people that come and work here or are trying to put their best work out there, at the end of the day, I want everybody to have fun. And what you said is the other day we were having a meeting when we came up with something that we believe is great, and we were like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. And we were like, yeah. I mean, so it's fun. It's hard. You have to work at it, and definitely when crunch time comes about, I mean, it's not fun. But at the end of the day, yes, it's a great experience, and we want to bring these people into the fold to actually get their name out there, get some books published, and hopefully open up their careers. I mean,
now I imagine it's it can be an experience for you that you're kind of like you're giving your baby away to some extent, and that yes, you're still involved with processes like this, but if some of these ideas came out of your head and now it's like, okay, well, and even like the books that you have been writing in the past, like how do you approach something where you're kind of delegating work to some extent and working with another writer, and then compare it to something like Wolvenheart where you're writing it yourself and it's all your own?
Well, the people that you choose, again, to a certain extent, is the first time that you meet them. Of course, first you need to actually go on a date before you actually get married. Well, some people do it the other way around, but I mean that's okay. But no, here we like to have coffee first with people that are going to work with us, and then we'll go on a bunch of dates, and then we'll get married. Look. At the end of the day, I prefer for them to actually shine, because it's not a copy paste process with the writers that come on board to do work for hire for Mad Cave, James. Because if not, you're going to take their freedom away. Then it would just be better just to get a ghostwriter and then just put my name on all the books. It'd be like, no, listen, this is the concept. This is the theme that the marketing team has been busting their butts trying to get. And look, we have identified that probably this is the right story that we want to tell because we're passionate about, and probably there's a gap in the bar market and there's no other book like this. So let's try to give people something different or something wild, something crazy. So that's what we tell these people. But again, we're just giving them a very small blueprint of what they want to do, and I just see them fly. I mean, they just started giving us again their pitches, their outlines, first pages, and then you make suggestions like, hey, why don't you go this route, or you know what, this is not working, or look, the pacing's not right, or whatever. But again, at the end, I want them to be on the page and not basically just telling them exactly what to do. When I'm writing it, sure, I put even on the CEO and the CTO for Mad Cave. When I'm writing, I basically go down to a writer's level and I really submit myself to the editors. I throw myself to the wolves, and I give them my scripts, and then sometimes they tear it apart, and sometimes they make suggestions, and sometimes they praise it, and sometimes they critique it, and sometimes they tell me shit. So and they just go about it and keep on working until we try to get the best possible product out there. So two very different approaches from the scripts, but at the end of the day, we kind of give a lot of freedom to everybody that comes and works for Mad Cave. And for example, with Anthony, we're working on a new series, and so we already know him. Mm-hmm. We already know his work. And with him, we just sat down and be like, listen, there's a story, blah blah blah. We just need this and that, and he's gonna make a couple of grown-ups cry like babies. So it's gonna be super fun.
That's great. That's a great goal as well. Like, you know what we're gonna do with this series?
Yes.
We're gonna make grown men cry like children. That's great.
Yes.
All right. Well, look, I think I'm already I'm a little biased because I've already seen the first issue of Wolvenheart, but I can now say from experience that between this and Show's End, like Mad Cave is definitely making a nice mark in the horror genre. I think you guys have already played in things like fantasy and you know, that kind of area. And now like these two series definitely make a nice step into more of the spooky territory. And there's a lot to look forward to here. Do you know offhand when Wolvenheart is going to debut?
Yes, Wolvenheart debuts October 30th. I love it. One day before Halloween. So yeah, we kind of timed that perfectly.
My dance card is getting so full for October. Like now's the time where all the publishers are announcing what's coming in October, and it's just like, here's all this is the I love that's like everyone understands this is the time to do the craziest, scariest shit. So they're just like, yeah, we're gonna do this. Yeah, who are we gonna do? Yeah, okay, Archie versus Predator. We're gonna do it again. Like, okay, like things like that like none of these things would exist in any other month of the year, but like it's launching in October. And that's perfect. So this is definitely an awesome Halloween book. So it 100% fits in that. So otherwise, like the talent search is still going on until September, right?
Correct. Yes, there are 44 days to go. People are free to submit, send questions, send comments. I mean, so far the reception has been great. And like you said, James, I mean, publishing a book from a team that actually won 2018's talent search, I mean, it speaks volumes in terms that, hey, we're going to stand by what we're promising, and it's not going to be any different. This New Year's winners, they're going to get their books published. If we get it to Mad Cave standards, if we actually get into a level which are worthy for the readers and for what the company's all about, I mean, absolutely, you're going to see that book published next year.
Awesome.
Fingers crossed.
So otherwise, aside from, picking up Wolvenheart, where are the best places to find you online?
Best places to find us is madcavestudios.com. That's our website, and we're on every major social platform, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Mad Cave Studios, at Mad Cave Studios. Or you can look me up in either Twitter, on Instagram. I'm pretty active. It's Mark London MCS, that's my handle for Twitter, and that's my handle for Instagram.
Cool. All right, but yeah, otherwise, folks, Wolvenheart is out October 30th to start, and is it a planned? I'm sorry, I should have asked this earlier, but is it planned as a limited series to start, or is it set up as an ongoing to begin?
Well, we're planning as an ongoing, but the first arc is going to be 7 issues, and then it's going to go on a little break, and then hopefully, depending on the popularity of the series, depending on what the readers want, we will just probably continue the story because there's a lot of story to tell.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, there's a limitless amount of monsters out there, so I think, if judging by the first issue alone, like we're going to cover a lot of ground, which is great. So,
oh
Mark,
my God,
thank
yes.
you for taking the time to speak with me today. This was awesome. You bring a very unique perspective to the industry, so this was really cool to see how you see it as both a writer and as a CEO and CCO of a publisher. So it's pretty valuable information for us. So this is great.
No, thank you, James, for having me. I mean, it was my pleasure, and all the nice comments, all the nice things you said about Mad Cave. I mean, thank you so much, sir. And I'm humbled. And thank you for your time.
No problem.
Really appreciate it.
Thank
you.
That does it for this episode of Funny Book Splatter, folks. I've been James Ferguson with my guest, Mark London. You've been listening to Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorDNA.com. We have been bringing you the best in horror since 2002. If you like the show, please help me out by leaving a positive review on Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe to the show via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. I am always looking for new guests, so if you have a horror comic, I want to hear from you. I don't care if you're a seasoned pro or a first-timer. You can find me on Twitter as @JamesFerguson or via email at james@horrordna.com. In addition to comics, we cover movies, TV shows, books, and video games. We've got news, reviews, guest features, interviews, unboxing videos, and so much more. Check us out at HorrorDNA.com and @HorrorDNA on Twitter.